So welcome everybody to another Saferpedia and Salus discussion. Amandeep, why don't you share, what are we doing today?
So we have Javier and Jag online, and they are our guests. We're going to be talking about diversity and inclusion in the workplace, and just have a candid, frank conversation around experiences, share some stories, take away some learnings, and yeah.
Well, and I'm going to drill this actually down even further in, because what we're really wanting to have an open conversation about is how can we be more supportive of the LGBTQS2 plus communities in our workplaces, you know, especially as health and safety professionals. Mm-hmm. Right? Because we are in a really great position where we can provide awareness. We're very nurturing and empathetic people by nature, right? And so it really positions us in a really good place to hear about, like, what are the advocacy issues that have happened in the past or happening now that have impacted people's careers and their journeys, so that we can also, you know, bring to the table our resources and our gifts and our knowledge in a collaborative way. So that's just kind of couching the conversation for everybody who might be listening in the audience, right? Mm-hmm. So I wanted to kind of kick it off, if I can, Amandeep, by asking our guests, you know, when you're thinking back, and I'm just going to dive really right into it because, you know, that's my style, is like when you're thinking back about your own personal experience coming in to the workplace, right? Is there any areas that really kind of impacted you coming into the workplace? I'll throw it at Jag first.
Yeah, so I, thinking back, like I started my career when I was 22. So I was quite young in the self-discovery process as well. I know at that age, I wasn't out to anyone except maybe one friend. So I think there was a lot of discovery I still had to do about myself and, I feel like at that time I was more worried who's going to find out about me. You know, when I went to certain places, when I went into the office. So that was something I was trying to find a balance with, right? So that was back in 2006. So things have changed a lot for me and in the workplace. Like I've noticed there's just more discussions happening around these issues. People aren't afraid to talk about them. Whereas I think before, and that might have just been my very young experience. Like I was pretty new out of, high school basically at the time. So I don't know if I had the same perspective as I do now, but I feel like, I've done a number of like talks in schools or in workplaces, and just seeing the difference. People actually seem like they care more now, and they want to make it safer for their employees. So I think that's been a huge shift that I've noticed over the last, I don't know how long that's been, 15 or so years.
Okay, I'm going to drill down on a bit of what you said in there in a moment, but Javier, I wanted to bring you in, and if you could share maybe your experience entering into the workplace also.
Absolutely, and I would like to talk. So I'm originally from El Salvador, small country in Central America, and I immigrated to Canada in 2004. So I came to Toronto directly. So I'm going to talk about my work experience from the moment that I came to Canada. And what I can say about that is that I was concerned about people finding out about me being gay. So at the beginning of my career here in Canada, I was presenting just a side of myself that I thought was work appropriate at the time. And I had experiences with coworkers that when they found out about me being gay, they didn't react very well. Some other people react well. And so that taught me, you never know. You never know in this context how people are going to react. And I wanted to have a career. I wanted to be successful at what I was doing. So with that in mind, I decided that it was best for my career progression just to be discreet about my sexual orientation. So that definitely was, I can call it a challenge at the beginning of my career. Obviously, as Jack was saying, things have changed quite a bit in the past several years. Although I can't say that today, it's completely, normalized, so to speak. Sexual orientation is still not normalized in the workplace, as I think it should be.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, no, and I'm glad that we're kicking this off, having the conversation here, because what you both have said is something that has come through the years from my own friends within the community, that feeling of having to hide a piece of who they are. Right, which is why we wanted to open up this conversation, because nobody should be feeling that way.
Absolutely.
Right. Amandeep, did you want to chime in?
Yeah, I was gonna say absolutely. Like growing up, especially being of the culture and the community, being brought up in Vancouver as well, you're taught that there's a definition for being normal, and that's what it is, and you need to stick within these parameters. And if you don't, then you're a deviant. And especially when it comes to sexual orientation as well. Like I remember being younger and exploring and just having that curiosity, but even so, like you're just so refrained, and it's all those social pressures. And again, going back to, I'm going to take it one step further and say, being of a visible minority and coming from the culture that we came from, and Javier, I'm pretty sure you can agree to this too, or you can share a similar experience, but there are certain gender roles that are made for certain cultures, like that they promote it. And so it's really hard to actually be yourself and to actually explore it and see exactly what it is that that you're experiencing, or whatever it is that you're feeling as well.
Yeah, definitely the cultural background has a lot to do with ultimately with the experience that you're going to have in the workplace. And my cultural background, just like yours, Amandeep, I mean, I come from Latin America. El Salvador is a very Catholic country, very conservative. So I grew up thinking that being the way I am was wrong, and that I needed to change, and that I needed to be different. So that's definitely something that followed me once I moved to Canada. And I guess now that I think about it, it's not just that I don't know that people were as mindful of sexual orientation back then, or if it was just me because of my upbringing that felt that people were going to say something. I think it's a combination of both, but definitely the cultural background has a big role in all of this.
Can I also jump in and say something? I feel like, at least from my experience, I had to act a certain way depending on where I was. So at home, being in a Punjabi home, I had to act a certain way. With my friends who knew, I could act a little bit different. At workplace, it was different. So you kind of had to mold yourself or morph yourself depending on how safe you felt with certain groups.
Right.
It's a constant. It's not like, you're just a straight person who gets to be themselves everywhere. You kind of have to pick and choose where you feel safe. Even with my now wife, like when we were dating, even after we got married, like if we'd be walking down the street holding hands and I saw an Indian person in the distance, I'd let go of her hand just out of fear of, what an altercation. Never happened, but you're just always a little bit on edge or a little bit more aware. I don't feel that anymore, but that was a big part of my journey for sure.
Yeah. And it's hard because it's almost like you're two different people and you can't be your true authentic self, and just having that as well. And yeah, it's so true. Like even even with me, I was a bit rebellious growing up, and by rebellious I mean I went against a lot of cultural norms and standards that were instilled being a female, being Indo-Canadian, South Asian, East Indian. And so it's really hard. And I can't even imagine when it comes down to the way you live or the way you are to almost have like, it's almost like having a double life. So at home, you're one person, and then outside of the house, you're a completely different person.
And it's something that it's not just challenging, but also it can affect your state of mind, in the sense that I used to feel jealous. I mean, why me? That was the question. Like, why is it like, look at all of this, straight, because like my personal opinion is that if the norm, the world was made around to make comfortable around, straight white males, right?
Mhm.
That's my personal opinion. And it's just the way it is. It's nothing against them. It's just a reality that at least from my opinion. And I would see people, that would correspond to that description and living their life and being themselves all the time. And I'd be like, I wish I could do the same thing, and maybe jealous, and make me a little bit bitter. If I were to be honest.
I want to move the conversation also into advocacy issues that have been happening over the years. And I'm doing this because I want to bring awareness to the fact that everybody has not had the same rights equally over time, right? And so you guys said that we're coming into the workforce. For you, Jag, it was around 2006. And for you, Javier, you said it was when you were immigrating to Canada about 2004. Now,
Right.
Can you remember back some of the advocacy issues that were coming forefront? What were your thoughts about that? And how did it impact your life in the work world?
So when you mean advocacy, do you mean like initiatives at the workplace to make LGBTQ2+ people comfortable?
Yeah, like I recall that back in 2004 was when the start of discussion about legalizing gay marriage was coming out. 2007, there were some human rights campaigns going on, right?
So yeah, in 2004, it was already legal to be married as a gay person or LGBTQ2+. But in terms of advocacy beyond, gay pride in the workplace per se, there was nothing. It's not like today where, in my current place of work, we have, employee groups that are sponsored by the company, around sports, books, movies, and, around LGBT to, the gay community, right? That is something that I've experienced at this particular company, at my previous employer. But when I started my professional life in Canada back in 2004, that didn't exist. It was pretty much you trying to figure out and navigate, what part of yourself you could, present to other people, like we were saying, and in which way. But definitely, in terms of advocacy, gay pride, and celebrating Pride and Pride Month did make a difference, right? You would see some people at their desk having the rainbow flag, but it didn't go further than that. So in terms of advocacy, things have changed and evolved enormously in the workplace. But again, I'm going to repeat this a number of times, we're not yet where we should be, in my opinion.
Right. And Jag, did you want to jump in?
Yeah, I don't know if it was so much like Javier was saying, like in the workplace, there wasn't much, but outside of that, I know what helped me tremendously was an organization called Share Vancouver. They started up in 2008, and Alex Senga founded it for queer South Asians. And, when I came across it, I was sitting in a cafe with my friend. I saw an article about gay Sikhs in Vancouver, and I just, zeroed in on it, because up until then I thought I was the only queer Punjabi person in the world, right? There was no one to look up to. There was nowhere to go to for these kind of support. So having them in my life throughout, like the past 14 years have been, my earring fell out, having been involved with Share Vancouver has helped me grow tremendously. They helped me come out to my family just by, being able to point to my parents, hey, there are other folks like us out there. And yeah, they've just grown so much over the last few years. It's a huge organization now with so many young, I feel like I'm part of the older generation now. I'm close to 40.
Yeah.
Things are much different than in my early 20s, but now seeing the younger folks coming out especially is really, really great. So yeah, they helped. They're doing amazing work in the community, right? Like school presentations, and just having resources for people who are in distress or who are struggling to come out to their families, who might have been disowned. Like, it's really incredible. So I think just that kind of education, especially in the South Asian community where our parents didn't have the vocabulary, they didn't have the knowledge, like it's doing huge things. And that, if that affects my personal life, if I feel comfortable at home being out, I'm going to be more comfortable in my day-to-day outside of my home. So there's a trickle effect, right?
And just to add to that too, like you're talking about before, so early 2000s, where there may have not been like a safe space, or there may not have been just those platforms, those venues, or even people to understand. I love the Share Foundation for what it is. Alex has done tremendous work in terms of the vocabulary, reaching out, having that safe space, having platforms, educating, having the documentaries, which Jag was also a part of. I think it's such great work, and it's definitely we're pushing, we're trying to get there. We're not there yet, as Javier had said, and I absolutely agree with that. But I think through education, knowledge, training, having these supports, having these events put on, and such as this podcast as well, it brings awareness. Absolutely.
And if I may, I think, one shouldn't underestimate also the power of, we have responsibility, each one of us. We have to do, I believe, our own advocacy, because you can have all these programs, you can have these groups, but you have to also, at the end of the day, create or make that difference in the workplace and help people understand and feel comfortable with, sexual orientation and gay and lesbian people and the community in general. I've come to a point in my career now where I don't think I need to be anything but me. And that is what I present regardless of the environment that I find myself in. And don't get me wrong, it's scary sometimes. And sometimes I go like, maybe I should tone it down. Maybe I shouldn't wear what I wear. Maybe I shouldn't, talk about being gay the way I talk about being gay. But if I do that, then fear wins and nothing changes, right? So when it comes to advocacy, I guess that's my point, is like, we have a role to play, and we should be very, very mindful of that.
I like that you brought that up, because that's one of the things, like the young workers, when you're coming in, you were saying at 20 and whatever, and you had not yet shared with other people, your choice, and you hadn't yet come out and shared, right? I'm hesitating because I just, the whole thing come out seems to me so oppressive. Nobody should have to feel like they have to come out. And so when you're seeing my struggle with wording and stuff, is because it makes me so sad to even hear that, but I know that that's the truth, is that it's a struggle to disclose. And so I had a friend who's transgender, and he had to go to work in his male persona, and then at night be the female persona. It just broke my heart seeing that, and I'm going to cry on camera, so everybody's just going to have to deal with it, but the fact is that these are vulnerable workers, and our job is to help protect vulnerable workers, especially youth are vulnerable workers. So what can we be doing as health and safety professionals to help catch these people, and help nurture and make them feel comfortable? Like, what can we be doing?
Well, go ahead, Jack, go ahead.
I feel like often companies will slap a pride logo on their, website header, or, for 1 month they'll do that. And it's not actually really doing anything for anyone. They're not actually creating safe places in the workplace. They're not providing support. I think I can speak to an experience I had yesterday. I did with our documentary Emergence. For those who don't know, it follows myself and 2 other queer Punjabi folks and our journey of coming out in our culture. And we presented at Columbia College yesterday. And it was a room full of, mostly international students from Punjab, I would say. And during the discussion afterwards, like during the Q&A panel, it was really touching. One person in the audience, a student, he felt comfortable. He was like, there's so much positivity. He's like, I've never done this in such a large group, but I want everyone to know I'm gay. And if anyone has any questions for me, please ask. Right. Another person came out as well. And the school, the librarian was there, and she was saying that if anyone is in distress, if anyone is going to be at risk of losing their home or their family by coming out, come to us. We have supports in place. No one's going to lose their student visa. No one's going to get sent back to India. You're safe here. So I think them having something in place where, because people are in these kind of positions, especially young folks who are here on student visas, they are very much at risk, right? So having that was incredible to see that they have supports. If someone's going to lose their home, they have procedures in place to help them. So I think that goes beyond just, if they had put changed their logo to a rainbow, that's the end of the story. What is that doing for anyone? Nothing. It's just them kind of jumping on the bandwagon. It's a marketing ploy at that point, right? So I think if workplaces can have actual meaningful supports in place, if someone, like for example with Share Vancouver, if someone reaches out to them who's in distress, immediately they will be paired up with a master's level counselor, right? So those are the kind of things we need. We can't assume everyone's coming out story is going to be safe. We can't assume, because everyone's cultural upbringing is different. There's different issues that everyone's dealing with. So I think that for me, that's the biggest thing, seeing what's a workplace going to do for this person. If, you don't want to have them lose their job over this, right? So yeah, that's what I would say. Javier, I'll let you.
Yes, thank you. And I think that in terms of what organizations, corporations can do to help their employees, their LGBTQ2 plus employees feel comfortable, is definitely, just like we have presentations on regular basis sponsored by HR around mental health, around our benefits. Well, have it around the gay community, the challenges, and having those kind of initiatives that make you feel that it's okay to be you. Another thing that my company does that I think it's fantastic is that June is Pride Month, right? And they have all sorts of, and it's widely announced across the organization. There are, presentations and talks and activities around Pride. And, as an employee, you go like, okay, I can be comfortable here. I can be myself. And having also access to, psychological support services in case of being, in a tough situation, being a difficult coming out situation, because, it could be that you're doing well at work in terms of being accepted, but not necessarily at home or outside of work, and that's going to affect your behavior in the workplace. So having an outlet that you can call and talk to somebody that can support you, and a company providing that kind of service and promoting that kind of service, because if nobody knows about it, then what's the point, right? I mean, it doesn't change anything. So as I talk about it, I think there's a number of things that a company could do, but it's important that they promote them, right? Just having them for the sake of having them is not enough. They have to be pushed almost towards, to the employees.
And I feel like if it's not pushed, then, let's say that was me, I'm struggling, I want the support. It's not really talked about. I don't want to be the only person, asking about it or reaching out. But if it's made normal, if this goes out more often, then it's like, okay, this is just a support. There's no judgment. I can feel comfortable. Yeah, especially for people who are closeted, like that's a fear of being exposed, right? So you don't want to feel like you're the only one. And, all eyes are going to be on you if you reach out for that.
I like what Erin said. That kind of fits with me being like a straight person is invite in, right? I think that's very beautiful, because that's what I feel like. If somebody is trusting me with something that they're frightened to share with the rest of the world right now, I feel like I've been invited in. So that's really comforting to hear that kind of word. Now, Steve, you had some thoughts, some questions. Did you want to unmic and ask?
You're muted.
Okay, sorry
There you
about
go.
that.
Because you were saying it comes down to how management works with the real issues. So let's get beefy here. I know you're going to do that for us. What do you mean by real issues?
All right, so as a business owner, manager, you have to look at every individual as an individual, not as a label.
Correct.
So, and I'll relate real quickly one experience, and this is just one out of many, but we had a transgender welder who came into our shop, wanted to work, and all the other guys were like, this is he's a whatever. I won't say the word, and I'm like, who cares? Can they weld? Can they do the job? Can they perform? And in the same time, this woman was our best welder we ever had. So he quickly earned everybody's and so it was just like an eye-opening experience for everybody that worked for our company, that, hey, we're going to send out our top guy or girl, and he, was in between at the time, and performed better than anybody else in the company.
Right.
So it doesn't boil down to a gender. It doesn't boil down to it really is, how do you perform on the job?
And then how are those supervisors, managers, etc., providing authentic support for individuals? Is that what I'm hearing you say?
Yes, I mean it boils down to an acceptance of that. If the person is in the workforce and they can do the job, I don't know about the rest of society, I can't judge that, but I know in the workforce, how do you perform? I don't care if you're gay, you're straight, you're crooked, whatever, but crooked is a little bit different, but I think everybody needs to be judged on their ability. So it doesn't matter what your sexual orientation is, it doesn't matter what color your hair is, what color your eyes are, doesn't matter.
Correct.
Thanks, Steve. Go ahead, Javier.
And I would like to say, when it comes to health and safety professionals, actually, it's something that came to my mind while I was listening to Steve, is that there are industries where it's more difficult to be gay than others, right? And I think health and safety professionals should be acutely aware of that.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
If you are working for a certain type of company where, because of the population that works there, it's less of an issue, you're going to have a certain type of programs to support the gay community or LGBTQ2+ community. If you know that you're working in an industry where there's a lot more stigma, then you might want to implement a different types of program, probably somebody a little bit more aggressive and more in your face almost.
Another thing I was going to say was, so me, myself personally, being brought up in the trucking industry and then later on in my life getting into construction as well. A lot of times, like I absolutely agree with Steve, there was very little acceptance. So if you didn't fit a certain type of mold, or if you were anything apart from what the norm was, you were either shunned, or individuals just wouldn't engage and socialize with you. There were jokes that were made. When I was working up in Fort McMurray, staying in camps as well. Everything was it was heavy on the gender based. Right down to the camps, where some of them, they would ask you, okay, do you prefer to stay in the male side, or do you want to stay in the female side of the wing? And you could tell that there were people that were of the queer community. They didn't identify as being heterosexual or straight, and it was just a very awkward and uncomfortable place to be. And I, being straight, I never could really relate, but I could try and empathize with them. And then coming back to Vancouver, and it wasn't until recently and lately that there have been the conversations, there is the training, there is the resources. I still feel like we're not doing enough, and we're not there, but we're trying. But then, yeah, it throws you off, and I try and promote it wherever I can. Especially being a part of associations and committees where you're trying to promote that inclusivity and that diversity, and you're trying to educate people right down to how you phrase things and verbiage, terminology. Yeah. I was recently at this leadership training put on by the BC Center for Women in the Trades, BCC WIT, and they actually had some training on the queer community and how you can open up those conversations in a workplace. So again, like construction industry, it's very rough around the edges. But I think it's all these small steps that we need to take, and especially as individuals as well.
Yeah.
In my experience also, I've noticed in conversations when we're talking about what have we done for the weekend, I can take ownership to say, Amandeep, what did you and your partner do this weekend? Right? And then allow you to come into the conversation and self-identify how you want to term your partnership with whomever, as opposed to saying, oh, Amandeep, what did you do with your boyfriend? Because right there, I've automatically made an assumption about your sexuality. I've labeled you.
Well,
right?
but that is
Go ahead.
That is part of the challenge, right? Like, I mean, what you just said is part of, that's when I say we're not where we're supposed to be. Like, for people that first meet me, the default is going to be, whether I like it or not, is like they're going to think Javier's straight, right? And the questions and the conversations are going to go around it. I make a point, this is when I try to be as out as possible for people to realize that I'm gay from the get-go, so I don't get questions about girlfriends and, well, I mean, gay couples have kids too, but, I don't have kids and things like that. And just to show how uncomfortable people can be around starting the conversation. I mean, you were talking about starting conversation about it. Like, how do you go and talk to somebody who you think might be part of the gay community about, their life? And I'm going to give you an example of what I experienced at work. So, I've seen many times people asking other people, oh, do you have kids, right? They ask them directly. It's a normal question. Nobody has ever asked me, are you gay? Ever. However, I know for a fact that they go and ask other people, is Javier gay? And when people come and tell me this, I go like, well, I'm glad you told them the truth, which is that I'm gay, but why didn't they ask me? The question I have in my mind is, why are they uncomfortable coming to me and just asking me that personally? Why do they have to ask other people? Well, because they're not comfortable yet with the topic.
Yeah. Or society's programmed us to be uncomfortable.
Correct.
The problem is that just people in general are conditioned, I think, to think a certain way. So if I see an attractive woman, attractive guy, if I have a conversation around that, that makes everybody uncomfortable. Maybe even the people that you're talking about. But the bottom of the line is, who gives? Who cares? It shouldn't be anybody else's business but yours.
Exactly.
I mean, I have 2 daughters and a son, and I mean, as far as I know, they're all heterosexual or straight, but even if they weren't, who cares?
Right, but like you said, society is not conditioned. People are not conditioned to actually, even if they think that.
So how do you do that?
Well, this is where all of us need to make an effort to change the situation, right? This is where, we shouldn't be ashamed of, even if they don't ask us about our weekend, to talk about our weekend.
Not even ashamed is a bad word to me.
Well, or concern, right? Like, I mean, there's in a corporate environment, it's people are always concerned or mindful of what is it that they're projecting, things that they should say, things that they shouldn't say. And that extends obviously in a particular way to sexual orientation, right? So, something that can help people get more comfortable is you in a spontaneous way going like, oh, this weekend with my boyfriend, I did this and this and that, right?
Who cares?
Right, exactly. And everybody starts, as you do these things, you normalize the conversation. People are more comfortable talking about it.
Right. Let's be honest.
Yeah, absolutely. So question for Javier and Jake, growing up and especially getting into that corporate world and into that workplace, did you find that you had any allies, or was there anybody that you could trust or have that one person at work where you could share that piece about you?
For me, it wasn't really like company led. I just ended up becoming friends with a woman who, happened to be very accepting. And she was probably my first friend in life who I came out to, actually. That was just by coincidence, but if she wasn't there, no, like absolutely not. And I just wanted to say also one thing, like it shouldn't just be a matter of someone going, let's say a trans person, like Steve, you were saying, going into a workplace and relying on them to prove themselves. That shouldn't be enough. There should be training, there should be educational, speakers or whatever it is, that's constant, not just for June, but year round. Because otherwise it kind of feels like a bunch of hyenas going after someone, right? They have to work even harder. We have to, as people of color, we have to work even harder we're always proving ourselves that we're good, as good as straight people or cis people who are born in the gender they were born in. It shouldn't be a matter of always having to prove ourselves,
Right.
and just telling these guys, like, can they do the job? They should have a certain level of training that they come in with, or that they're provided, so that it's not always that situation, because the next person could be much more vulnerable than the one who succeeded, let's say, in the job. There should be more supports, I think, rather than hoping they
I agree. And upper management at any company or any organization should understand that.
Yeah.
If you have an open mind, you can learn anything.
And that, let's say this trans person had a great experience. This person, felt comfortable at the company. They, got promotions. They'll tell their friends, other members of the LGBTQ community will feel comfortable applying at this workplace because they know it's safe. So that's how you do it. You treat one person, or treat everybody the same. Other
Correct.
people are going to work there. And then, you get the benefit of having amazing.
You get the best people.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that's how it starts. I think there's a lot of work there that, and it needs to be ongoing. It's not just one time thing. It's not like, oh, this person, you don't know who's gay, you don't know who's trans. So you have to just assume that there are people in your workplace who are, whether you know it or not. And how are you going to make them feel comfortable without making it a huge deal that we're going to point this person out? Let's do the training properly.
I wanted to kind of ask the two of you if you could maybe share from your work experiences, right? And because you've got a wealth of experience being in the workforce between the two of you, for sure. What would you recommend for professionals who are responsible for creating and implementing health and safety programs in organizations to be thinking about when considering the needs of the community?
Well, something that's been done or is starting to be done, in companies more and more is be mindful of pronouns. So just when when again, talking about assuming, like, I think one of the biggest roadblocks is just the fact that people are assuming that your sexual orientation is this and that, and then that blocks you from being yourself. So by you proactively going like, and this is, I've been to sensitive training around gender at the company. This is something the company has pushed on us, and it's fantastic. One of the questions now that you can ask somebody when you meet them is, what are your pronouns, right? So and that is a simple thing that can make a really big difference.
Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. The more we normalize that, and that's, to help people, not assume, which is a huge thing. So I definitely agree with that. I think, I don't even remember what your question was now, to be honest. Sorry.
Well, what are your recommendations for the professionals who are responsible for creating and implementing health and safety programs? Because remember, there is a health piece of it as well. There's safety, which is people's physical safety in the work environment, but there's also the health aspect for people's mental health and emotional health in the workplace. And I think one of the things that you guys both brought up before, which is very valuable, is when there are supports and there are programs, etc., normalizing the use of them, right? And helping navigating people. Maybe we could talk about that a little bit more, because I don't think that health and safety professionals who are very much in that role of being able to do so nurture enough to those programs. What are other people's thoughts?
I think, I think the first thing that health and safety professionals need to understand is that this is still an issue, right? Being gay, lesbian, LGBTQ2+ in the workplace is still an issue. The worst thing I think a health and safety professional can do is just assume that because for them it's not a problem, that it's not a problem for anyone. Right. So that would be the best beginning, if you ask me. And then obviously, all of these programs, all of these talks that, like Jack was saying, need to happen throughout the year, not just in June. Well, none of that would happen if it weren't encouraged by management, right? Like, this is part of a comprehensive program that needs to be elaborated by, health and safety professionals for the employees in a company, right? As opposed to one-off, initiatives. I think health and safety professionals should be thinking in a holistic way, right? What are our priorities? What are the values of our company? And how do we transmit that to training through talks, through presentations, through participation in different sorts of events, and how do we promote it so that people feel included and comfortable in the workplace, and ultimately they end up being healthy individuals.
Exactly. And I think also in those positions, they should have either queer, professionals on those health and safety committees, or they should have advisors who are from the queer community. Otherwise, it's a bunch of straight people telling queer people, here's how we're going to help you, which
Correct.
is doing a disservice. And also,
I disagree.
Hold on, Steve. Hold on, Steve. Go ahead, Jake.
I'd love to hear.
I just want you to finish up.
For example, here in BC, like in Surrey, there's a huge South Asian population. In those kind of businesses and organizations, it shouldn't be a whole bunch of white people, white straight people, because they don't understand. And this is the same for often people looking for therapists and counselors. If I'm, a brown person going through this, a white straight person isn't necessarily going to understand the nuances of my culture and why certain things are the way they are, right? So I think there needs to be that. But yes, Steve, I'd love to hear why you disagree with that.
Sorry, just to add to Jag's, it's funny that you say that, because when I was looking around for a counselor, I was looking for somebody that could relate. And that's a huge piece of it. You need to have somebody where they can empathize, that they have somewhat of a similar lived experience, because they actually truly understand and then they get it as well. So absolutely agree with you on that.
Yeah.
You need to have that representation. When we talk about, it's funny how inclusion and diversity for some people, and even recently, it's just a buzzword, but what does it really mean? Like, have you actually taken time out to educate yourself and inform yourself? Do you work or deal with anybody of the queer community, and what does that even look like? Just because you may be straight and you haven't experienced it, that doesn't negate or take away from the fact that you are responsible to educate yourself. And having these committees and boards and whatnot as well, you need to have somebody that can be relatable and that can relate to this. So absolutely agree with you 100%.
And I mean, just to prove, to open up the discussion, Amandeep and I tried to find somebody in health and safety from the queer community. And we know they're there. We know that there are people there, but they're so scared that nobody wanted to come forward.
Right.
That says something to Amandeep and I.
But what did you do then? Like, I mean, if you know somebody would be good at the role, and you know that this person is part of the community, why don't you just go and say, hey, we have this role. I think you'd be perfect for it. Have you thought?
Oh, no, I meant come on the podcast, Javier.
All right, so
I meant come today on the podcast, because they didn't want to have other people know, right?
If I
their
can't
workplaces,
rebut
right?
what Jag and
I was saying. But just to answer your question, Javier, is that that's why, like, we tried, but to come on the podcast, right? So it was hard.
It was hard to find somebody. Like, we can have a candid conversation, and I have plenty of friends in the queer community, but when it comes to talking about it or coming out or being on a podcast where it's being recorded, a lot of times people don't want to, and I totally respect that. I absolutely. And that's why Javier, yourself and Jay, like, I thank you guys from the bottom of my heart, because we need to have this education. We need to have these conversations.
Steve, I know you want to say something, Steve. Go ahead.
I'm just chomping at the bit here.
I know.
All right, so to address the issue of people not being able to identify, I don't think you necessarily, and Amanda and Jag, if you're looking for a counselor, you really want somebody who's kind of little off kilter, who understands, and you're making the assumption that old white guys, in management don't understand. That is not true.
I think, you know what, Steve, I think you're making a very good point. I think there's, just like there has to be sensitivity towards us, we have to have sensitivity towards people that would fall under what we call the norm, right?
Mhm.
It's not, it's not, I think the way you present things, and it wasn't, I don't think Steve, anybody was trying to say that you don't get it. We're talking in general terms. And the fact of the matter is that it does happen, right?
I understand that.
And it's more about lived experience. It's not that I'm not saying that everyone doesn't understand. There's a certain level of experience that Javier, if I went to you, I think you would understand a lot of the struggles. I would be able to relate to you in a way that I would feel comfortable. He's been through this journey. You've been through,
Is somebody judging you?
What do you mean right now?
So no, if you went to a counselor, would they be judging you?
I'm not afraid of being judged. It's about them not.
That's not their role. Their role is to help you.
It is, but I agree with Jag in the sense that every individual, every person, we have our pre-built biases, stereotypes, we have experience. You can educate somebody. There's education and then there's experience. So somebody could be as educated as possible, but subconsciously still hold those, again, stereotypes, biases, lived experiences. And in order for...
No, it's their motivation.
Fair enough. Yeah. And I believe that no two counselors are the same. So I've seen a few in my time. My counselor that I have right now currently, she can relate to a lot of things that I express, that I tell her, because she's got very similar lived experience. So her background, she's East Indian, South Asian, Indo-Canadian, brought up in the relatively same time period, same area. And so when I talk to her about my concerns, my issues, my everything, everyone's got issues. I have mine. So every time I'm talking to her or I have a session with her.
I even have mine, so it's okay.
Yeah. Hey, no one's perfect. And she can relate. And then based off that, like, we have good, constructive, healthy conversations. But
yeah,
I think I would have
that's a one-on-one connection.
Yeah.
So, but if she were a white wasp, whatever.
Yeah.
Would you have that same connection?
I don't think I would, because going back to those lived experiences. And another example I have is one of my friends, he is of the queer community. And right now he's specifically seeking and looking for a queer sensitive counselor, but they're so hard to come by. And I never realized that. Again, there's certain things being straight that you just take for granted.
If you're
I just want to bring
counselor, hang on one sec.
Yeah.
Well, Steve, no, I'm sorry. We have only 5 minutes, so I'm going to cut this off and navigate back, right? Yeah. Because this is health and safety, what we're talking about. So I want to stay inside the realm of our audience, who are health and safety professionals. And so they're out there saying, okay, well, we're not talking about counselors. We're talking about me in the organization as a health and safety person. And so one of the things that you brought up, and I thought is a very valid point, is that when you're making committees, when you're putting things together, get individuals from different backgrounds into those committees. And to be upfront with you, Steve, that's a very fair comment, because a lot of times in health and safety committees, I even notice that it's mostly one race of people on those committees often, right? So I think that there's validity in us taking a step back as health and safety professionals and saying, how are we intentionally, what are we doing to intentionally, with our ways of doing things, bringing people together? And even in training, right? Everybody talks about training, but training is another tool that you can navigate people to collaborate and come together who don't often work together. I know when I did my training, I would actually buddy employees up with people they don't typically work with, and then send them back out into each other's departments together, and just there help to build rapport between employees. So what other ideas might you guys have that you could share with us that we could be doing?
If I may, I think something that would be extremely that would help health and safety professionals, with these programs and try to figure out what to do is to look at this holistically, right? When we're talking about making people feel comfortable, whether they are of the LGBTQ+ community, it's, when it comes to diversity, talking about diversity in general, that also includes, for example, the role of women in corporate environments, right? So I think we have to be, we have to acknowledge what the issues are, number one, which is we're not all treated equal, right? And who are then these people that are being not treated on an equal platform as everybody else? And that could be gay people, that could be lesbian people, that could be women, right? So build a program that is comprehensive, that addresses all of those injustices, so to speak, so that you really are pushing for diversity in the workplace.
So how do you do that, Javier?
How do you do that? Well, by creating the programs, right? So first of all, you acknowledge that that's a problem, and then you create a series of talks, presentations. You bringing people in from the outside, depending on what the objective of the presentation is, right? It doesn't have to be necessarily internal people that do this. You can hire external consultants, or you can hire, or you can ask somebody from an association that, like the one Jack works with, to come and make a presentation about, the challenges of the particular community they provide services to. But and it has to be an ongoing work, and it has to be something that happens that is consistent in time, knowing that the end result, this is going to be, it's a slow process. Things are not going to change overnight. So that's important for health and safety people to remember, because they're going to go to these management meetings, and the managers, the CEO is going to go, okay, what have you done this quarter? How can you measure success, right?
And that was my next question. How do you measure that?
Well, because you can do surveys, right? You do surveys that are anonymous, and you can ask people, a series of questions that will give you an indication of how comfortable and happy they are in the workplace. And one of
beyond that, you can do surveys all day long.
Well, you can do surveys, and then you can look at the population in your organization, right? I mean,
exactly.
You start seeing, diversity and people being comfortable being themselves, in the workplace, then you've done a good job.
You measure it in employee satisfaction and how long employees stay.
Yeah.
I'm just going to grab the mic here for a moment, because we are up on our time. So I'm just going to ask Javier and Jag if you have last thoughts that you would like to leave with our audience before we do go.
Jag, you go first.
I think, having this conversation is a great start. It gets us, if we each learned one thing, or we're going to take one thing away, and that's why we do these kind of things consistently. That's why we do them on a regular basis. So every time you learn something new, and you're going to hopefully implement something, you'll go back to the management team and say, hey, let's think about this, right? So ongoing conversations, and I think really making an effort to make it an inclusive and diverse workplace, because at the end of the day, like, you want employees, like Steve was saying, you want employees to stay for a long period. You don't want, high turnover means something, that says something, right? So we want to create, I think, safe spaces for people where, they'll promote it too. Like, come work for this company, they're great.
And what I would say is that, let's take also responsibility for the role that each one of us needs to play. Training and presentations and all of those programs are obviously necessary, but at the end of the day, we are all changing the world in our own way. And I think we should all feel empowered and know that the way we behave, the way we talk to people, that makes a difference around you, right? So straight people, don't be afraid of, asking somebody, are you gay or do you have a boyfriend? Gay people, don't be afraid of just being you, right? If you don't step out of your comfort zone, things are never going to change, and things need to change because we are not in a fair playing field at the moment.
I love that. Oh my God. Thank you so much. So with that, we're going to close it out. Javier and Jake, thank you so much again. Thank you so much for being so candid, just being so authentic and being true. Thank you to the audience, Steve, everybody for coming out as well. Tamara, you're absolutely awesome. And yeah, absolutely. So definitely check out those resources. Jake had mentioned Share, so that's sharevancouver.com. Lots of information. We also, Tamara and I, we reached out to, I believe it was Pride Work. There's lots of resources there. You can find Javier and Jake both on LinkedIn. If you guys Google their names, absolutely, you can find them there as well. And yeah, tune in. We're going to be back next month as well. And we'll definitely be sending that out. So thank you to everyone. Thank you so much. Thank you again.
Pleasure.
Thank you.
Oh.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.